The autumn rain fell steadily outside the university library as James Reynolds gathered his worn textbooks. At 32, he'd finally achieved his dream of becoming a literature professor at Westlake University. Though his salary barely covered his modest apartment and student loan payments. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" James looked up to find a woman in an impeccably tailored suit gesturing to the chair across from him. Her presence commanded attention without effort, confident, poised, and startlingly beautiful. "Not at all," he replied, clearing space among his papers. Victoria Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Technologies. Hadn't planned to duck into a university library during a downpour, but her driver was stuck in traffic, and she had a presentation to finish. She'd expected to find a quiet corner, not a conversation that would change her life. "Preparing lectures?" she asked, noticing his meticulous notes. "Trying to make 19th century literature exciting for freshmen," James smiled. "Not exactly. Cutting-edge technology." Victoria laughed. "Sometimes the oldest stories teach us the most." Their conversation flowed effortlessly from literature to technology, from philosophy to their contrasting childhoods, hers in boarding schools, and his in a small town where his parents ran a bookstore. "You see patterns in stories because you understand people," Victoria said, hours later. "I see patterns in code and markets. We're not so different." James raised an eyebrow. "Except for the fact that you probably earn my annual salary before lunch each day." "Money is just a tool, James. It doesn't define who we are." Over the following weeks, Victoria found reasons to visit the university. Coffee dates turned to dinners, museum visits, and late-night conversations. James introduced her to the peace of simpler pleasures. She showed him worlds he'd only read about. When he proposed 6 months later with his grandmother's modest ring, Victoria's answer came without hesitation. "People will talk," he warned. "The millionaire tech genius and the professor." Victoria took his face in her hands. "Let them talk. You're the first person who's ever seen me, not my bank account." The wedding was small, intimate, Victoria's choice, surprising the business world that expected a grand society affair. For a moment, everything seemed perfect. Their first year of marriage unfolded like a dream. James continued teaching while Victoria's company expanded internationally. They moved into her penthouse overlooking the city, though James insisted on keeping his small collection of books and his grandfather's old leather chair among her minimalist decor. "It looks out of place," Victoria commented one evening, eyeing the worn chair. "Like me?" James asked with a small smile. Victoria's expression softened. "That's not what I meant." Victoria began scheduling more social engagements, galas, charity functions, industry parties where James often stood alone by the bar while she networked with investors and tech moguls. "You could try harder to fit in," she suggested after one particularly tense drive home. "These connections matter for my business." "I tried talking to that venture capitalist about modern literature. He looked at me like I was speaking another language." "Because you were," Victoria sighed, "just ... Stick to safer topics." The invitations to her business meetings stopped. James found himself transformed into what the tabloids called Victoria Blackwood's trophy husband, a charming accessory rather than a partner. "The board is watching everything I do," Victoria explained when he confronted her. "Women in tech are scrutinized constantly. I can't show any weakness, and I'm a weakness." James asked quietly. Victoria's silence was answer enough. He retreated further into his teaching while she worked later hours. Their home became a beautiful, empty space where they orbited each other without connecting. When Dominic Parker, Victoria's chief marketing officer, began appearing in more of their conversations, James noticed how Victoria's eyes lit up, discussing their projects. "You should invite him for dinner sometime," James offered, testing the waters. "He's too busy," Victoria replied quickly. "Besides, you wouldn't understand the technical discussions." That night, James discovered a text on Victoria's phone while she slept. "You're wasted on him. He'll never understand your world." James said nothing, but began paying closer attention to Victoria's company affairs. He discovered troubling patterns in financial reports she'd left open on her. Laptop signs of potential fraud hidden in the subsidiary accounts overseen by Dominic, Instead of confronting her, James quietly began researching, collecting evidence, sacrificing sleep between his teaching hours. Victoria never noticed his exhaustion. He was consumed with preparations for their upcoming anniversary party. A lavish affair, she insisted, would showcase Blackwood Technology's success to their investors. She never asked if James wanted the party at all. The anniversary celebration transformed the botanical garden into a wonderland of crystal and light. 300 guests from tech royalty to actual royalty mingled beneath a canopy of imported flowers and champagne fountains. James stood by Victoria's side in a tuxedo she'd selected, smiling politely as photographers captured what appeared to be the perfect power couple. "James, darling, fetch me another drink," Victoria asked, her hand already turning away from him. Toward the Japanese investor she'd been courting for months. He returned with her preferred champagne to find himself excluded from the conversation circle. This had become their routine, Victoria summoning him when useful, dismissing him when not. He retreated to a quiet corner. Watching his wife shine in her element while feeling increasingly invisible, Dominic Parker appeared at Victoria's side, his hand lingering too long on her back as he whispered something that made her laugh. "Hey, James." Noticed the matching ambition in their eyes, the practiced synchronicity of their movements. The dinner bell chimed, and guests took their places at elaborately decorated tables. Victoria clinked her glass for attention as servers poured expensive wine. "Thank you all for celebrating with us tonight," she began, her voice carrying effortlessly across the hushed room. "3 years ago, I made what many called a surprising choice." Polite laughter rippled through the crowd, but Blackwood Technologies has never followed conventional wisdom. We take calculated risks. James felt his stomach tighten as Victoria's gaze briefly flickered to him. "Some investments pay off better than others," she continued. "My husband has been an interesting experience." The subtle emphasis wasn't lost on anyone. More laughter, less polite this time. "James comes from a different world than ours," Victoria gestured to the assembled tech elite. "He teaches literature while we build the future. Sometimes I wonder if he even understands what I've built." James sat perfectly still as the room's attention turned to him. "But he looks wonderful in photos," Victoria added, drawing outright chuckles. "And everyone needs someone waiting at home while making history, don't they?" Dominic raised his glass. "To Victoria, who carries both her company and her marriage on her brilliant shoulders." The toast circulated while James felt each pair of pitying eyes like physical blows. Victoria barely noticed his rigid posture as she accepted congratulations. When dinner concluded and the small orchestra began playing, Victoria approached with 2 investors. "James, entertain Mrs. Fernsby about your little university stories while Philippa and I discuss the Singapore expansion." Something in James finally broke. "Actually," he said, voice steady despite his pounding heart, "I'd like to offer my own anniversary toast." Victoria's smile froze. "Darling, we've already done the speeches." "I insist," James replied. "Already." Walking toward the small stage where the band paused their playing, Victoria followed, whispering urgently, "What are you doing?" "This isn't on the schedule." James took the microphone. "I'd like to share something special with everyone tonight." James stood alone on the stage, his quiet dignity a stark contrast to the opulence surrounding him. Victoria hovered nearby, her perfect smile strained as she attempted to gauge his intentions. 3 years ago, I married a woman I believed saw the real me," James began, his voice soft but carrying to every corner of the suddenly quiet garden. "Tonight I'd like to show you something none of you have seen, including my wife." He nodded to the tech team, who looked uncertainly at Victoria. Before following James's instructions, the massive screens positioned around the garden for business presentations flickered to life. "James, this is inappropriate," Victoria hissed, but fell silent as the first image appeared. The footage showed Victoria 2 years earlier, panicking in her office late at night. "The takeover bid is happening tomorrow morning. We've been betrayed from inside," she was saying to her lawyer on speakerphone. "I don't have the liquid assets to block it. Everything's tied up in the expansion." The scene shifted to James and their home, listening to Victoria's desperate phone calls from the other room. Then came footage of him entering a modest bank, emerging with documents. "That's the day you miraculously found emergency funding," Dominic said from the crowd, confusion evident in his voice. The video continued, showing James signing over property deeds, his family's bookstore, and the small inheritance his parents had left him. "I never told you," James said, turning to Victoria, whose face had drained of color. "Your emergency funding came from liquidating everything I owned. The bookstore my family ran for 3 generations. I signed it all over to a holding company that provided your counteroffer funds." Murmurs spread through the crowd as more footage played. Security camera videos showing James discovering financial irregularities in company reports, collecting evidence of embezzlement, and finally confronting Dominic in private with proof of his betrayal. "You were planning to sell company secrets to competitors." James's voice came clearly through the speakers as Dominic's recorded face showed shocked guilt. "I won't expose you if you resign quietly and return the funds. Victoria never needs to know her trusted friend was stealing from her." The current Dominic backed away from Victoria, making for the exit as security discreetly moved to block his path. The final footage showed James running into a burning building, Victoria's first office space, when a fire broke out during their early dating days. The security camera captured him, emerging carrying unconscious Victoria before collapsing from smoke inhalation. "As the paramedics told me, I fainted outside from shock," Victoria whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You never said because I didn't want you to feel obligated," James replied, his voice carrying in the perfect silence that had fallen over the party. Down from the stage, walking calmly through the parting crowd. "Happy anniversary, Victoria." 3 weeks passed without a word between them. James moved into a university colleague's spare room, while Victoria faced the public fallout: Dominic's arrest for corporate espionage, the board's emergency meetings, and the endless speculation about her marriage. Her penthouse felt cavernous without James's quiet presence. She found herself staring at his empty chair, remembering how she'd wanted to replace it with something more suitable. Now she understood. It wasn't about the chair at all. Victoria canceled her meetings one Tuesday afternoon and drove to Westlake University. She sat in the back of James's classroom, watching him engage students with passionate discussions about redemption and classic literature. He didn't acknowledge her presence, but she saw how his shoulders tensed when she re-entered after class. When the last student left, she approached his desk. "Your lecture was beautiful," she said softly. "Why are you here, Victoria?" His voice held no anger, only exhaustion. "To return something that belongs to you." She placed a folder on his desk: property deeds to his family's bookstore. "I bought it back from the developers. They hadn't started demolition yet?" James stared at the documents. "I don't want charity." "It's not charity, it's restitution." Victoria's carefully constructed poise crumbled. "I became everything I swore I'd never be: someone who valued status over substance." She placed a second envelope beside the first. "This is my resignation. As CEO, the board voted to keep me, but I need to rebuild something more important than a company." James finally looked up. "You love that company." "I love the work. Somewhere along the way, I started loving the power more." Victoria took a shaky breath. "I'd like to help restore your family's bookstore, not as Victoria Blackwood, tech millionaire. Just as Victoria, your wife, if you'll still have me." James was silent for a long moment. "The woman I married disappeared. A long time ago. She's finding her way back," Victoria whispered. "If you'll give her a chance." 6 months later, a small bookstore reopened in downtown Meridian Square. The original sign had been carefully restored: Reynolds and Family Booksellers, ESD, 1923. A new line had been added beneath, in Blackwood Reading Room. Inside, Victoria arranged displays, while James helped a young girl find adventure stories. They worked in comfortable synchronicity, their relationship rebuilt on a foundation of humility and truth. Professor James. Student called, entering with friends. He came for the poetry reading. Right this way, Victoria smiled, leading them to a cozy room with mismatched chairs, including one well-worn leather armchair in the center. That evening, after locking up, James and Victoria walked home hand in hand to their new apartment above the shop. "Do you miss it?" James asked. "The empire? The power?" Victoria considered this honestly. "Sometimes, but I was building something hollow. This," she gestured to their simple surroundings, "is solid. Real." James squeezed her hand. "Proud of you." "That's worth more than everything I gave up," she replied, understanding at last what wealth truly meant.